On December 26, 1980, in the quiet woods of Suffolk, England, nestled between the twin NATO airbases of RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge, something strange was seen moving among the trees. Bright lights, darting movements, sudden animal silence. What was first dismissed as a downed aircraft quickly turned into something else. Something that neither the U.S. Air Force nor the British Ministry of Defense wanted to talk about. But the more puzzling part, neither did the press. Despite having hundreds of military personnel stationed nearby, and dozens of potential witnesses, the local newspapers in Suffolk, particularly the East Anglian Daily Times, ran no major coverage of the event until years later. And by then, what had actually happened had already warped into legend. Today, the Rendlesham forest incident is often called Britain's Roswell, and like Roswell, it carries a strange weight not only because of what was reported, but because of what never made it to print. This is the Afterlight Files. We archive the eerie, the unexplained, and the stories that disappear from the margins of official history. Tonight, we're investigating not just what happened in the Rendlesham forest in 1980, but why newspapers kept it quiet for so long, and whether that silence was an accident or a decision. The story begins just after midnight, in the early hours of December 26, 1980, when two American servicemen stationed at RAF Woodbridge, a base operated by the U.S. Air Force under a NATO agreement, noticed strange lights descending into the woods just beyond the eastern perimeter. At first, they thought it might be an aircraft crash, possibly a downed civilian plane, so a small team was dispatched to investigate. What they found in the woods was never officially explained. The men reported seeing lights that moved unnaturally, hovering, darting between trees, changing colors and splitting apart. According to their written statements, the light had a metallic structure at its center, and one of the men, Sergeant Jim Peniston, claimed to have approached the object and even touched it, describing strange symbols on its surface, similar to hieroglyphs or binary markings. When they returned to base, visibly shaken, their report was logged but not widely discussed. Over the next 2 nights, the lights returned. On the third night, December 28th, the base's deputy commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, led another team into the forest to investigate. Halt brought with him a handheld tape recorder and began documenting the experience in real time. That recording, later known as the Halt tape, captures what appears to be a tense, confused group of men witnessing fast-moving lights, changes in radiation readings, and what they describe as a red sun-like object moving through the trees. But none of this made it into the press. Despite multiple nights of documented sightings involving U.S. military personnel on British soil, some of whom filed official reports and witness statements, the British media remained silent for more than 2 years. The East Anglian Daily Times, the region's leading newspaper, published no article on December 27th, 28th, or 29th about any activity in Rendlesham Forest. In fact, it wouldn't be until October of 1983, nearly 3 years later, that any major publication covered the story, and even then, it wasn't British media that broke it. It was an American tabloid. On October 2nd, 1983, the News of the World, a now-defunct British Sunday paper known for its sensational headlines, published a full-page story titled, "UFO Lands in Suffolk, and That's Official." The story was based on a leaked copy of Lieutenant Colonel Halt's memo, titled Unexplained Lights, which had been sent to the British Ministry of Defense in January 1981. The memo confirmed that something unexplained had occurred and that multiple personnel had been involved. This raises a disturbing question. If the U.S. Air Force filed reports and the British MOD received them, why didn't the local or national press report on any of this at the time? And why, when they finally did, was the story relegated to the tabloids? Some have suggested that the silence was simply due to Cold War protocol, that both the US and UK governments wanted to avoid causing public panic, or that they feared the incident involved advanced surveillance drones from the Soviet Union. That theory might explain why the military was tight-lipped, but it doesn't explain the press blackout. Multiple former journalists have since stepped forward and claimed that they submitted the story to editors at the time, only to be told it wasn't newsworthy or lacked hard evidence. One such journalist, speaking anonymously to UFO Magazine UK in 1997, said, "We had the names, we had the memo, we had the tape, but the paper refused to run it." They said it wasn't the kind of story they wanted to be responsible for. Another theory suggests that a D notice may have been issued. In the UK, a D notice, now known as a DSMA notice, is a request from the Ministry of Defence to editors not to publish certain information for reasons of national security. These notices are voluntary but strongly encouraged, and they leave no public record when issued. If a D notice had been quietly sent to newspapers in Suffolk and London in late December 1980, it would explain why a story involving dozens of military personnel, official memos, and audio recordings was completely absent from the news cycle. And if no D notice was issued, then we're left with an even more unsettling idea: that editors chose not to print the story. Whether from fear of ridicule, pressure from above, or the belief that the public didn't need to know, the Rendlesham event stayed out of public view for nearly 3 years. When the story did finally break in 1983, it came with little follow-up. Mainstream outlets still treated it as fringe. The BBC didn't run a full-length investigation until 1985. Even then, the tone was cautious, dipping into skepticism, treating the witnesses with polite detachment. But as the years passed, new evidence kept surfacing. In 1997, Lieutenant Col Halt went on record to say he believed the object was not of this world, a statement he later reaffirmed in a sworn affidavit. In 2002, a retired radar operator claimed that unknown objects had been tracked during the week of the sightings, moving at speeds impossible for known aircraft. In 2010, the Ministry of Defence released files that confirmed something had happened in Rendlesham, but maintained there was no threat to national security, and therefore, no investigation was warranted. And to today, Rendlesham Forest is quiet again. The trails are open to hikers. A wooden UFO sculpture stands in a small clearing near the site. Visitors take photos. Most don't know what happened there. But the question remains: why did no newspaper cover what may be the most well-documented UFO encounter in British history, right when it happened? Was it fear, or was it something closer to policy? And if it was policy, who made the call? This is the Afterlight Files. Subscribe for more stories sealed in envelopes, buried in memos, and folded into the empty spaces between public knowledge and hidden history. Until next time, keep listening.